Thanks for joining us. I'm Lorelei Shabayo, and we are interviewing the different practitioners that share their work at the Metaphysical Empowerment Events. I'm here today chatting with Marina Ormes. So Marina, what is it that you do? What work do you share at our events?
I'm an evolutionary astrologer. So I look at people's astrology charts from the perspective of your life purpose and mission. What is the bigger picture of what you're here to do? And how are you invited to grow and evolve into that? So basically looking at your past, your karmic past, and what you bring into this life with you that kind of determines your challenges and things, the way that things show up in your life that invite you to work through them to step into that highest potential for yourself.
So I guess you bring your computer to the events, and then people give you their birth information, and then like poof, you have a whole chart.
Well, actually, what I do at the events is I just tell people about this one particular super focused part of your chart. It's called the lunar nodes, and it helps you see, like, in a nutshell, really where you come from and what it is that's going to help you move forward. And so I can give little samples of, we can spend a couple of 5 minutes together talking about your own particular lunar nodes. And we don't even need a computer to look that up. We can just look it up on a chart based on your birthday. So it's pretty fun.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. How long are the sessions typically at a fair? Because you can do the short ones for 5 minutes, what
Yeah. Really, it can be pretty short, but very impactful. The information that you get, goes deep. And so people find that, they got to kind of take it in and it resonates. And then they want to think about, well, how does that fit with my life? And what does it mean? And thinking about different ways that shows up. So it gives you a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, great. And I imagine that intuition plays a role in your work also. There are ways that you're sensing more things. Is that correct, would you say?
I'm sure it does. I'm definitely in the flow. As an astrologer, I work with this, really, it's a vast language. And so when I'm looking at the symbols and how they relate to each other, it gives me information that's on really a whole different level than how we sort of, like, in our science classes are taught to think about things, so with that language, I just have a whole spectrum of possibilities. And then, the intuitive part comes in how I connect with the person I'm talking to. So, it's like what I'm saying resonates for them. How are they making the connection between that? Because sometimes the connection is really obvious and people get it right away. Other times the connection is, it's like, well, it's not so obvious. But then once we start talking about, what is it they're actually dealing with, you can see that the underlying pattern is there. It's just maybe that the first example you gave wasn't the right example. Mm-hmm. So it really, it's like this, it's kind of a pattern, a language of this underlying pattern that works.
Oh, great.
The flow.
And what are your private sessions like? I imagine you go into more depth in some of those, or?
Yes, definitely. So in my private sessions, if people choose to do a longer time with me, we do the same thing, the lunar nodes, only we go into the whole chart. So we'll do your whole chart. We'll look at how those lunar nodes are. You get a lot more detail about how they show up and what that means for you and what your story is and how it applies really to the things that you're coming with questions about. So, somebody has an issue in a relationship, or they're struggling with work, or, the classic things that people might be challenged by. And when they come with those things, the understanding what is the underlying pattern of what it is their soul needs to get from this. It's kind of like, why is this happening? And how is it serving you? And how can you work with that energy to learn your lessons, do your growth, your healing, so that you're stepping into that invitation that the universe is providing for you. So yeah, so we do that in much greater depth, looking at the specific issues and circumstances of your life and how you can respond to them in the most empowered way.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
And how did you first get interested in astrology? How did you open to doing this work?
Well, I actually grew up in a very scientific household. My father was a career astrophysicist, worked for NASA, and so astrology was not on my radar until after college, I was really searching for something that, you know, had more of a spiritual feeling, or more of a more of a comprehensive feeling. You know, like I felt like science and the explanations that I was given for the world could only handle part of our experience. And there was a whole part that just wasn't talked about, that was left out. And I was like, what about that? And that, to me, when we talk about healing and understanding who we are, that was the piece that, you know, you can't leave that out. You can't leave out your, you know, your emotional and spiritual needs and experiences, and how to work with energy, and, you know, these things that we just didn't have words for in science.
Yeah.
So that was what really spoke to me when I first found astrology, was that it really did kind of open up this whole world that also was a language. You know, it was logical in the same ways for me that science was. And so that was what really worked for me. It was like it gave me here's like a step-by-step. It's just much more complex, and it's much more inclusive and holistic. It gives you your, not only your physical needs, but also your mental needs, your emotional needs, your spiritual needs. It kind of incorporates and includes the wholeness of our human experience.
No, that's great. I don't know if you know, I was a scientist also, and I imagine that in the beginning, when you were using astrology, learning and using astrology, that you were essentially doing, you know, tests too, and getting your own verified experience of how accurate and how useful it was. And
totally, sure, yeah. And that's one of the things that we tend to dismiss, is what about our own experience of it? You know, just because you don't have a double-blind study with, you know, massive numbers, you know, if it works for you, what about that? What about that? It made a difference for me, and it helped me see things differently, and it helped me feel better and see my life from a whole different perspective. Like, to me, that's valid.
Yep, it's great. It's great. Well, I'm looking forward to having you more at our fairs. This is great. It's very exciting. Fun
Thank
having
you
fellow past scientists too, right? Exploring more the mystics and metaphysics. So, Marina, how can people find you on the web if they'd like to learn more about you?
I have a website at astrologyheals.com. I also have a book that came out in 2015 called Cycles of Healing, so you can check out my website for that. And I'm working on a second book that's going to be coming out later this year.
Sounds great. And for those of us watching, we look forward to seeing you at our Metaphysical Empowerment Fairs. Other events, we're at MetaphysicalEmpowermentEvents.com. See you soon.
Super excited. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks, Marina.